The wedding day. The only thing John left behind after failing to return home was a farewell letter in an envelope. It read as follows.
I made a huge mistake at work and got fired. I'm no longer worthy of making you happy. No, a guy like me has no right to keep living. That's why I'm disappearing from your life, Michelle. I'm leaving my parents' inheritance to my only family, Amanda. She's still out there doing her best, and I worry about her. I've already signed and sealed the divorce papers included. Please file them while I'm still alive.
Fired from work. But why? John had always taken pride in his work. I needed to find him quickly. However, 5 years later, I was attending my best friend's wedding at a New York wedding venue. And there, in a tuxedo, I saw a man. As I looked closer, I realized it was John. My mind went blank. However, at that moment, a woman called out to me. She told me the truth, and my feelings for John turned into bitterness. My name is Michelle Wilson, and am a 35-year-old high school teacher. After earning my teaching license upon graduating from college, I began teaching at the high school where my father was the principal. My mother passed away while I was still in college, and for a while, it was just my father and me living together. 6 months ago, I got married. My husband, John, is 3 years younger than me, currently 32. We met when I was in my 3rd year as a teacher. In the class I was assigned to as a freshman homeroom teacher, John's younger sister, Amanda, was one of my students. But Amanda dropped out only 3 months after enrolling. That was because her parents passed away shortly after she enrolled. I recommended she apply for financial aid, but she refused. Amanda said she couldn't stand being pitied by her classmates. Most of the students at our school came from wealthy families. Amanda was no exception. Both of her parents worked at top-tier companies. That's probably why she didn't want to be seen as someone different from everyone else. In reality, the way the other students looked at Amanda grew colder. They treated her as if she had suddenly become someone who didn't belong in their world. Given that, it was understandable that she felt uncomfortable at school. Still, I tried convincing her several times, but Amanda was firm in her decision and submitted her withdrawal papers. Even after that, I was worried about her and went to check on her at home, but the only one who greeted me was her brother, John. When I asked about Amanda's situation, he responded bluntly.
Amanda said that since she dropped out of high school, it was hard to find a job in our hometown, so she moved to the city where there are more opportunities.
There was no way for me to contact her directly. With that in mind, I visited John several times, as he was the only one who knew about Amanda's situation. At first, John responded with an annoyed expression, but over the years, he gradually started sharing updates about his sister. Then, about a year ago, when I visited to ask about Amanda, John said this to me.
Thank you for worrying about Amanda all these years. Honestly, at first, I thought you were just a nosy teacher. But I was drawn to your kindness and how much you care for my sister. If it's okay with you, would you consider dating me with marriage in mind?
It was an unexpected proposal from him. I never imagined John felt that way about me. At first, I hadn't been conscious of it at all, but before I knew it, I had started to have feelings for John. So, I gladly accepted his feelings and we began dating. 6 months later, we got married. John, a local journalist, had an irregular work schedule. And since I was the advisor for a school club, I spent weekends at practice and tournaments. Even though we were married, we hadn't had the chance to hold a wedding ceremony. But as the principal's daughter, there were expectations. My father insisted that we hold a proper wedding, so I brought it up with John. Hey, John, I have to maintain my dad's reputation at work, so I really want to have a proper wedding. My colleagues keep asking me when the big day will be. I know your job keeps you busy, but can't we figure something out? When I asked him, John gave a slightly uncomfortable look and replied,
Well, I'll try to talk to the company and see if I can get some time off.
John's tone was indifferent. I figured it must be difficult for him to take a long break due to his work. A wedding requires a lot of preparation, not just the big day itself. Thinking about it made my head spin. To make things easier for John, I decided to limit the guest list and have my father help out with the preparations as much as possible. We chose a venue, the same public service hotel where my parents had their wedding. Since my father and I knew many people there, the preparations would go smoothly. I asked John to come only when his presence was absolutely necessary, like for fitting his suit, to avoid disrupting his work. However, even for the fitting, John said, anything's fine, and didn't show up. In the end, I had no choice but to choose the groom's suit myself, based on his height and build. As the wedding day approached, John came home late every night. I wondered if something had happened at work. With those worries weighing on me, the wedding day finally arrived. The night before the wedding, John didn't come home. There wasn't even a phone call. I reassured myself that he would show up at the venue on time. I informed my father that John hadn't returned, and he came over that morning concerned.
John didn't come home? What's going on? No matter how busy he is as a journalist, his company would at least let him attend his own wedding.
Hearing that, I realized how strange it was. Come to think of it, John hadn't invited anyone from his company to the wedding. No matter how busy his workplace was, at least one of his supervisors should have attended. But it wasn't just his colleagues. He hadn't even invited his only family member, Amanda. John had said, "My sister's job situation is unstable, so attending the wedding isn't a priority." It all felt like I had forced the wedding on him for my own convenience. A wave of anxiety swept over me. Would John really show up at the venue? But there was no point in dwelling on it. I decided to get ready and head to the venue early, even if it was just me. With that in mind, I began getting dressed in the bedroom, and that's when it happened. As I sat down in front of the dresser to fix my hair, I noticed a white envelope placed on top of it. Written in bold ink were the words, "Farewell letter." Panicking, I tore the envelope open. Inside, there was a letter and divorce papers. The letter, written in John's handwriting, said the following:
I made a huge mistake at work and got fired. Am no longer worthy of making you happy. No, a guy like me has no reason to keep living. That's why I'm disappearing from your life, Michelle. I'm leaving my parents' inheritance to my only family, Amanda, because she's still trying so hard on her own, and I'm worried about her. I've signed and sealed the divorce papers. Please file them as soon as possible while I'm still alive.
It seemed that while I was away, John had returned home briefly to leave the letter and then left. But just because he got fired. Why? John had always taken pride in his work. I had to find him as soon as possible. Just then, my father walked into the room to check on me.
What's wrong, Michelle? You look so pale.
Startled by his voice, I turned around and accidentally dropped John's letter on the floor. Noticing this, my father quickly picked it up and read it. After reading it all the way through, he looked at me with a serious expression.
Let's call the venue right away and cancel the ceremony. Don't worry. I'll personally call each guest and explain.
After my father said that, I contacted the venue. I told them that the groom had fallen ill and asked them to cancel the wedding for the day. My father also called each guest personally to apologize sincerely. When I mentioned that I wanted to file a missing person report at the police station, my father stopped me, saying, "Hold on." "Why, Dad? We need to find John quickly."
Don't you think something's off? Even though this wedding was mostly for your side of the family, John didn't invite a single guest of his own. There might be a reason why he disappeared so suddenly.
I had thought it was strange too. But weddings are usually centered around the bride's wishes. Maybe John didn't invite anyone from his side because he never intended to have a wedding in the first place. But what am I supposed to do? Just sit around and wait? What if something bad happened to him?
Leave this to me.
After saying that, my father quickly left the house. He told me to stay put, but I couldn't just sit and do nothing. "John, please be safe." Hoping for the best, I ignored my father's advice and went to the police station to file a missing person report. From that day on, I did everything I could to search for John. 3 years passed, but I found no leads. The police initially kept the search going, treating it as a possible life-threatening situation due to the letter he left behind. But if he had taken his own life, his body would have been discovered somewhere. No such information ever came in. As 3 years passed, the police's efforts started to wind down. John had to be alive somewhere. I kept believing that, holding on to hope that he'd come back. Then, one day, I received a call from my father, and when I answered, his words left me speechless. John had been betraying me all along. My father had hired a private investigator over the past 3 years to track John down. The worst possible truth had come to light. My father urged me to file the divorce papers John had left behind immediately. Still, I didn't want to believe it until I saw it with my own eyes. Even if the investigator's report was true. Another 2 years went by. It had been 5 years since the day we were supposed to hold a wedding ceremony. There was still an empty hole in my heart. I was so tired of waiting for John that I had no strength left to keep moving forward. For those 5 years, I poured myself into my work as a teacher, trying to stay grounded. I'd been a high school teacher for 13 years now. My time was solely filled with work, but I managed to make a close friend among my fellow teachers. She recently decided to leave her job and marry a man from New York. I received an invitation to her wedding, but part of me was hesitant to travel to New York. Still, it was an important invite from a dear friend. I decided to attend with gratitude. And finally, the day arrived. It was a popular wedding day with several ceremonies happening at the venue. One couple in particular caught my eye. There were no guests, just the bride and groom standing alone. No, there was only one woman who seemed to be a guest. I could hear whispers from other guests speculating as they glanced over. It seemed that couple was in a common law marriage. I overheard someone say that one of them couldn't legally marry due to certain circumstances. I found myself watching the couple with curiosity. Then I gasped. The groom in the tuxedo. As I looked closely, I realized it was John. The circumstances must have been because he and I were still legally married. What my father had said 2 years ago, it had all been true. According to him, John had run away with another woman and had been living with her ever since. At the time, I couldn't accept it. I loved him more than anyone. My mind went completely blank. Then, I heard a woman's voice behind me.
Michelle.
I turned around, and standing there was the only guest who had attended John's ceremony. It was Amanda. At first, I didn't recognize her because of her makeup, but as I looked closely, I could see traces of her high school self. Amanda, is that you? When I asked, Amanda covered her face with both hands, sat down, and began sobbing.
Michelle, I'm so sorry.
Watching her apologize through her tears, I couldn't help but wonder what was going on. Amanda, please, look at me. Can you tell me what happened? I gently rubbed her hunchback as I spoke. Slowly, she lifted her face and replied.
It's all my fault. John misunderstood when I dropped out of high school. He thought you were to blame and tried to get back at you. Because of that, you ended up suffering so much, and I couldn't even apologize.
Amanda continued to cry. But I couldn't understand what she meant. Anyway, if we stayed here, John would overhear everything. If the story about him seeking revenge on me due to some misunderstanding was true, it would be better to talk things through in a quiet, private place. With that in mind, I arranged to meet Amanda behind the venue after the wedding ceremony we were attending was over. Then, I returned to the hall where the wedding I was invited to was taking place. But Amanda's words lingered in my mind. I couldn't focus at all. Thankfully, I wasn't scheduled to give a speech. Even so, one of my colleagues sitting next to me noticed my distraction and mentioned that I seemed out of it the whole time. I felt like my best friend, the bride, kept glancing at me with concern. On such a joyous occasion, I was completely out of it. I felt so guilty for worrying the friend who had invited me. As soon as the wedding ended, I stood up quickly. I told my colleague that I was meeting someone and headed to where Amanda and I had agreed to meet. But when I got there, Amanda wasn't alone. 2 other people were standing with her. John? I whispered in a trembling voice, pointing at him cautiously. Not only was my voice trembling, but my whole body was shaking. Standing there was John and the woman he was in a common law marriage with. Having just finished the ceremony, still in her wedding dress, she firmly grabbed Amanda's arm. When Amanda saw my face, tears started streaming down her cheeks.
Michelle, I'm so sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen. I came here alone, but...
Keep your mouth shut.
John interrupted her with a terrifying intensity, silencing Amanda's words. What is going on? More than anything, I couldn't understand why John, who had betrayed me, lived with another woman, and even entered a common law marriage, was now standing boldly in front of me. John, why did it come to this? Please explain so I can understand.
This woman still doesn't get it? She had no idea she was being played from the start.
John's girlfriend burst out laughing as she responded to my question. Played from the start? What does she mean? As I stood there, stunned, John finally revealed his true colors.
I wanted to get back at you. Amanda had to drop out of school because she had a privileged, wealthy teacher like you as her homeroom teacher.
That's right. And when I noticed Amanda acting strange, I followed her after the wedding. Imagine my surprise when I saw her meeting the woman John was trying to get revenge on. You've got guts, I'll give you that.
John's girlfriend glared at me with a look of pure contempt, as if I were the enemy. Revenge? What exactly did I do?
John, stop it. You've got it all wrong.
Amanda tried to intervene, but John's girlfriend cut her off. With her mouth covered, Amanda struggled and broke free, raising her voice.
John, you blamed Michelle for not standing up for me when I dropped out, but that's not true. I left school because I wanted to. Yet you used that as an excuse for revenge, got married, and then ran off to New York to be with Susan after 6 months. Why didn't you listen to me?
What? So that's what happened. In other words, I had been deceived into marrying John. Realizing that everything went dark before my eyes. I had loved him and waited for him. I had searched for him all this time, and yet this was too cruel. The sound of rustling came from the shadows.
I've heard enough, John.
My father stepped forward as he spoke. Dad, why? How are you here? When I asked, my father revealed that he was still having a private investigator look into John's current situation. The woman with John was named Susan. She had been 2 years behind John in middle school and admired him. When Susan was in her senior year, Amanda had joined the same school and ended up in the same club as Susan. So that's why Amanda was close to Susan. At first, Susan had flattered Amanda, who was the sister of the senior she admired. For example, when Amanda was scolded by other seniors, Susan would defend her. But in return for her kindness, Susan demanded that Amanda set her up with John. Amanda couldn't refuse Susan's requests, as Susan was originally known as a scary senior. Amanda asked her brother John to date Susan, and John agreed willingly because it was an important request from his beloved sister. Susan was delighted, and the two had been together ever since. In other words, John had kept his relationship with Susan a secret when he married me. He only married me as part of his plan for revenge, intending to betray me 6 months later. He knew that disappearing on the day of the wedding would cause me the greatest pain. Leaving a farewell letter was just another way to throw me into panic. From the very beginning, he had calculated everything before approaching me. My father hadn't relied solely on a private investigator to uncover John's past. He had also reached out to former classmates from the same middle school John attended, many of whom had graduated from our high school. My father had a wide network and was trusted by everyone. Whenever he reached out to people, there was always someone willing to help. After finishing his explanation, Amanda apologized to me.
Michelle, I should have told you about John's plan much earlier. I'm sorry. Susan threatened me. She said that if I said anything, she'd take his inheritance and run away.
Hey, don't you dare say another word.
Susan frantically tried to stop Amanda. The inheritance must have been the one John mentioned in his farewell letter, his parents' estate. I thought he intended to leave it to Amanda. But that, too, turned out to be a lie. John had kept the entire sum for himself to support his life with Susan. While Susan looked panicked, John glared at her with anger.
Susan, were you planning to blackmail Amanda and run off with the money?
It was just an example. Wouldn't you have been in trouble if Amanda had blabbed about your plans? I was doing it to protect you. You should be grateful.
Example or not, I could never forgive them. Susan had worked with John to carry out his twisted scheme. They had no idea how much they had hurt me. John had acted without ever trying to listen to Amanda, while Susan had silenced her for the sake of their revenge. How could these two be so despicable? Overwhelmed with rage, I shouted with every ounce of strength I had. Enough, both of you. Sure, maybe I couldn't support Amanda enough as her teacher. But John, you claimed you were worried about your sister, yet you never even tried to understand how she really felt. Amanda decided to leave school on her own because she wanted to live independently. You misunderstood that and sought revenge on me? You were completely in the wrong. And Susan, you just found it amusing and went along with it, didn't you? What you both did was inhumane. How do you not see that? My sudden outburst left John and Susan frozen in place. Seeing them like that, my father let out a quiet chuckle. He looked like he had something to say.
Oh, by the way, since you had a common law marriage, it seems no one showed up at your wedding. But weren't you expecting your co-workers to gather for the after party?
What? How do you know that?
John asked with a puzzled look on his face. I couldn't help but tilt my head in confusion as well. Why would my father bring that up at this moment? And with such a confident grin, no less.
John, the company you're working for in New York, the CEO is actually one of my former students. I ran into him on my way here.
John was left speechless by my father's words. No wonder. He had just found out that the father of the wife he abandoned knew his boss. And if the CEO found out John had deceived his mentor's daughter, the consequences would be dire. John opened his mouth, trying to speak, but no words came out. Then my father pulled out his phone. For some reason, the phone was already on a call. He held it to his ear and started speaking.
Oh, did you hear all that? Oh, I see. I'll let John know. See you later, Tom.
Wait, Tom? You don't mean?
John asked with a shocked expression, and my father smiled slyly.
Yep, Tom, the CEO of your company. He said he's canceling the after party.
Wait, you mean you had the call running the whole time?
My father nodded lightly. Then he began explaining the details of his earlier encounter with Tom, the CEO of John's company. My father had come to New York on business that day. While walking, he had run into Tom, his former student, and invited him out for drinks. But Tom had declined, saying he had an after-party for a colleague's wedding. When my father asked about the colleague, Tom mentioned the man was in a common law marriage because he hadn't legally divorced his previous wife and was from the same town, aged 32. Everything matched John. When my father told Tom that John's real wife was his daughter, Tom and the colleagues nearby were stunned. Upon hearing that John was holding a wedding at the venue where I was, Tom headed straight over. As soon as my father spotted John, he called Tom on his phone and kept the call connected, letting him hear the entire conversation. Even I couldn't hide my surprise at how far my father had gone for me. John, caught in my father's trap, suddenly let out a strange cry.
No. What am I supposed to do now? The CEO is so strict, and he always says a man who doesn't value his family is worthless. I'm done for.
If a strict boss like that found out about John's schemes, it was clear what would happen to him. According to my father, many of Susan's co-workers were expected to attend the after-party. The reason for the cancellation would undoubtedly be explained in detail. There was no way John and Susan would walk away from this unscathed. As working professionals, they had turned a major life event, marriage, into a deceitful act meant to ruin someone else's life. Their actions would surely damage their reputations at work. John and Susan's faces turned pale.
Damn it. What am I supposed to do? I quit my job in my hometown, moved to the city, and finally got hired full-time.
I've been working at the same company ever since I graduated college. I even helped improve company performance. How could you put me in such a bad position now? I knew I shouldn't have helped you, John.
They were only concerned about their own futures. But no matter how much they panicked, they had brought this upon themselves. John had always claimed to be a devoted brother. And yet, now he didn't seem to care about Amanda at all. Instead, he looked at Susan with desperate, pleading eyes and said,
This can't be happening. I moved to the city relying on your income, Susan. If I lose my job, how am I supposed to survive?
John crouched down on the floor, whining miserably. Watching him, I felt relieved that the marriage had failed. The man in front of me wasn't the John I had searched for and waited for all these years. Why did I ever love someone like him? Thinking that, I felt the weight that had been pressing on my chest finally lift. I turned my thoughts to Amanda, who had been caught up in all this. However, she also looked calm now that the whole ordeal had been resolved. I gently spoke to her. Amanda, I'm the one who should apologize for dragging you into all of this. But more importantly, how's your life going now? Amanda smiled as she answered.
Yes, I've been working while attending night school since I moved here. I graduated from high school and eventually earned my degree from night college last year. I'm a full-time professional now, and my life has settled down.
Her words made me breathe a sigh of relief. I had worried about her for so long. Seeing my reaction, Amanda's expression became more serious.
You're the one I'm worried about. John committed such terrible acts that your life could have been ruined because of him. I don't even know how to apologize for that. What will you do now, Michelle?
Amanda leaned in and looked into my face, and I responded with a small, wry smile. Don't worry about me. I'm not that fragile. Honestly, the only thing on my mind right now is how much alimony I should demand from John. After all, I haven't even submitted the divorce papers yet. As I said that, I immediately glanced over at John. At the mention of alimony, John flinched and avoided my gaze, his eyes darting nervously. Then he mumbled in a faint voice, barely above a whisper.
Alimony. I can't pay that. I don't have any money.
It was a faint murmur, almost like he was talking to himself, but I heard it clearly. Don't you have your parents' inheritance? John's eyes widened in shock at my words. He was probably hoping to hold on to the inheritance, thinking his future life would become difficult. However, since John and I were still legally married, his life with Susan could be considered an affair. John had been dating someone else even before our marriage, making our relationship nothing but a lie. If he refused to pay alimony, I could sue him for marriage fraud. When I said that, John finally accepted his fate. Of course, if I pursued a marriage fraud case, Susan would be implicated as a co-conspirator and would also be liable for alimony. Fortunately, my father was there, so I had a reliable witness. I told them I'd be contacting them through a lawyer regarding the alimony and left with my father. John and Susan watched us leave with defeated expressions. Even if they tried to escape, Amanda had promised to keep an eye on them. Knowing I had someone like Amanda on my side was reassuring. Finally, I submitted the divorce papers. I had been through so much pain, but it finally felt like I was waking up from a long, terrible nightmare. 3 days later, my father received a call from Tom. John's company specialized in weddings and funerals, so they were very strict about how their employees handled their personal marriages. Naturally, Tom said they couldn't keep John, who had tricked me into a false marriage, as an employee, and he was immediately fired. As for Susan, she worked for a company in the same group and had been an MC at wedding receptions. Though she wasn't fired, she was removed from her MC duties and reassigned to menial tasks around the office. Her salary was cut to less than half of what she used to earn. Still, I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy for them. I demanded $30,000 in alimony from John for deceiving me into a false marriage and for living with his mistress for years. I also demanded $20,000 from Susan as compensation for the affair. The two of them paid the full amount at once from John's parents' inheritance. However, living in an expensive city took its toll. John, who had recklessly thrown himself into life with Susan, barely had any inheritance left. After paying the combined $50,000, their funds were completely drained. John, who had no college degree or professional certifications, would likely live a modest life while job hunting alongside Susan, who now earned significantly less. I heard that Susan wants to break up with John, but he's clinging to her, crying, "I'll be ruined if you leave me," so she can't get away. Susan should have just kept a fond memory of John close to her heart, just as he was a senior she admired in middle school. It was Amanda who shared all this personal information about John and Susan with me. Since then, Amanda and I have been in regular contact. She told me she's working hard at an IT company. Although she was only my student for 3 months, I still vividly remember how talented she was, ranking at the top of her class during the May midterms. I was truly glad that she had risen this far through her own efforts. On top of that, Amanda told me she was getting married next spring. Her partner is the same age as her and works at the same company. When I read her message, I couldn't help but smile and press the call button to congratulate her. "Hello. Congratulations on your engagement."
Thank you, Michelle.
Amanda's cheerful voice came through the line, brimming with happiness. I could tell right away that both her personal and professional life were going well. Moreover, Amanda told me she wanted to invite me to her wedding as her high school mentor. What's more, it would be a small reception, and it'd be the only guest on the bride's side. I couldn't help but feel hesitant about that. Are you sure? What about your teachers from night school or college? Is it really okay for you to invite me?
Yes, you're the only true mentor I've ever had, Michelle. I really want you to meet him, so please come. Oh, and don't worry. I've completely cut ties with John. I didn't invite him to the wedding, and I haven't even told him I'm getting married.
Hearing that, I honestly felt relieved and gladly accepted her invitation. Amanda had severed ties with her troublesome brother and was about to build a happy home. Witnessing such an important milestone in a former student's life is the greatest joy for a teacher. My father, now approaching 63, continued to be admired by many of his former students as a principal. Watching him, I reminded myself to follow his example and continue striving to be the best teacher I could be.